Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. It is becoming abundantly clear that as the climate inferno encircles us all, the United Corporations of America and its bosses, i.e., corporate CEOs, are totally fine killing their employees. Let's first look at this week's conditions. The heat all around the US, all around the world, is extremely dangerous and suffocating. This is the map of the United Corporations of America this week. Almost 68 million people, 20% of the U.S. population, living in areas expected to have dangerous levels of heat. When you look at it, that is 70 major cities are forecasted as of today to have dangerous levels of heat. 70 is better than last week, which was 118, but not exactly anything to celebrate. And of course, as all this is going on, the federal government, which is purchased by these corporations, is doing nothing. But first, let's show you the big business who, in response to the excessive heat, are lobbying to basically kill their workers. From The Guardian, big business lobbies against heat protections for workers as U.S. boils. It could take years for the federal regulators at OSHA to set new heat rules as excessive temperatures are killing Americans at work. Big business lobbyists, including big agricultural and construction groups, are pushing to water down or stymie efforts at the federal level, federal and state levels, to implement workplace heat protection standards. This summer, millions in the U.S. have been exposed to some of the hottest days on record, inciting renewed urgency for federal protections from heat exposure for U.S. workers. The Biden administration has proposed federal heat protections for workers, but those rules face stiff opposition and could take several years to be finalized under current rulemaking processes and laws. They could even be scraped depending on the outcomes of 2024's election. Business groups and lobbyists have aggressively opposed efforts at state and federal levels to enact heat protection standards for workers, claiming employers already practice what a standard would mandate, expressing concerns about the burdens on employers, and claiming the efforts take a, quote, wrong approach. Yes, as Status Coup has been covering for years, Amazon, Walmart, all of these fine corporate citizens are totally following the standards and procedures to keep their workers safe. Stay tuned. We'll show you a little bit on that note in a bit. But what's amazing about this, I'll read you a little bit more. Between 2011 to 2021, 436 workers died from heat exposure, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But that is most likely an undercount because heat-related deaths are often attributed to other accidents or health conditions. At present, no federal law protects workers specifically from extreme heat. Farm workers and advocacy groups are also pushing to include heat protections for farm workers in the 2023 Farm Bill currently being considered by Congress. Both Republicans in control of Congress, such a measure is unlikely to pass. In September 2021, the Biden administration announced the launch of a rulemaking effort at OSHA to develop heat exposure standards to protect outdoor and indoor workers. And speaking of those farm workers, this is from just a week ago. Homestead farm worker dies because of extreme heat. Farm Workers Association of Florida says the 29-year-old Efrain Lopez Garcia is the first Homestead farm worker dead victim of the extreme heat this year and the second one in the state of Florida. Quote, "It is happening. We are scared because more people are saying they're fainting and feeling the symptoms of heat stroke," said Yvette Cruz, communications coordinator for the Farm Workers Association of Florida. According to Jeremiah Lopez, that is exactly what seems to have happened to his brother while working at a farm homestead on July 6th. "My brother wasn't feeling well. He was weak," told CBS News Miami Lopez, who also said the victim did not stop working until his lunch break. Quote, "My cousin pulled him to a rest area. He then stepped away to get my brother water. And when he came back, Efrain wasn't there. They found him a few feet away, dead." Quote, "When some of these workers start feeling disoriented, they start walking by themselves and they get lost," said Cruz, referring to what seemingly happened to the victim. And this happened in Florida. By the way, I'm not sure I believe those numbers. There might be more farm workers and other workers who are outdoor for most of the time doing hard labor that have not been reported or have become wildly sick, but technically have not died that are not being reported in the numbers. And this, by the way, comes as the state of Texas, a fellow, the fellow anti-woke free state, is basically openly setting laws to kill workers. Remember, Lewis reported on this a few weeks ago. This is what's going on in Texas. Backlash brews against Texas law that eliminates mandatory water breaks. Texas had 3 straight weeks of high humidity and triple-digit temperatures in June. Critics of the law say it will create dangerous conditions for construction workers in heat waves. As Texans sweltered last month under a weeks-long record-breaking heat wave, the state passed a law that will eliminate the mandatory water breaks for construction workers in cities where such ordinances had been in place to protect people from extreme heat. House Bill 2127 passed the state legislature, and Greg Abbott promptly signed it into law on June 14th. The bill, which goes into effect in September, strips construction workers in Austin and Dallas of the right to water breaks every 4 hours and time to rest in the shade while on their job. You ever read George Orwell, 1984? We're there, folks. We are there. Of course, President Biden is not declaring a climate emergency. Of course, President Biden isn't going to do much of anything about this because the corporations are the president, not the president. Let's take a listen as a reminder to Biden's speech last week. Did not declare a climate emergency, but did offer cooling centers, enhanced climate and weather forecasting, and other crumbs. Let's take a listen.
Most people don't realize for years heat has been, I have to admit, I didn't know it either. I thought I knew it was tough, but the number one weather-related killer is heat. The number one weather-related killer is heat. 600 people die annually from its effects. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is providing billions to communities to make buildings more efficient and to make them more heat resistant, opening cooling centers for residential areas and in the cities that the communities can go to be safe. The Department of Interior is using infrastructure funding to expand water storage capacity in the western states to deal with the impacts of future droughts that are made all this extreme heat more consequential. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is launching a new partnership with universities and impact communities to improve the nation's weather forecast and its accuracy.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of your whole block on fire and the fire department showing up with super soakers. I spoke with a member of Climate Defiance, which is that group going around right now disrupting, speeches, disrupting a lot of events, fundraisers held by, top Democrats. They disrupted events with Joe Manchin. I believe they just disrupted another event with a big Biden White House person. Let's get a response from Climate Defiance to President Biden's bold climate actions.
But I mean, I think when we're thinking of workers, Biden tried to protect workers today, which was really, he didn't really do much. But UPS just unionized and finally got an agreement to put air conditioning in trucks. And part of it, we as in the climate movement really want to be supporting and in solidarity with the folks that are unionizing. And so one of our actions this week, we haven't been public about it, but UPS was hosting an event by the Natural Gas Vehicles Association of America to promote renewable natural gas, which is a terrible it's a fake solution. And we shut it down, demanding that UPS puts air conditioning in its vehicles because these UPS workers, they're in the cargo hold of their trucks most of these days, and everyone's seen these brown trucks. They get so hot. It's usually people have recorded 150 degrees in the back of these trucks, and you hear workers telling stories of when they leave the cargo hold and step out into Arizona It feels like the AC is on in Arizona when it's 110, 120 degrees outside. That's how hot the inside of these trucks are. And they have the companies have resisted putting air conditioning and protecting their workers for so long. It's like I think in the past like 7 years, around 100 or 200 UPS workers have been hospitalized because of heat stroke, because of liver failure due to dehydration. Like this is it's ridiculous. It's crazy, especially when UPS is reporting record profit. I mean, it's crazy.
And by the way, I have seen this across the country. I've done several reporting tours over the summer. I believe in 2020, I did the other pandemic reporting tour on during COVID on the economy and people struggling. I did one last year called, I believe, the Economic Hunger Games, focusing on inflation and people struggling. Just being out there for a week for me was brutal. Okay. The heat is brutal. Being a reporter out for an hour, 2, doing live streams, interviews. Imagine working 7, 8, 9 hours outdoors with limited breaks. It is literally life or death at this point. And you have states literally making it illegal to take water breaks or long breaks. Is this what Joe Biden meant by restoring the soul of America? This is the soul of America. And I don't think it's dramatic at all to say the big businesses in this country are literally okay killing their workers as long as they keep the engines of profit going. It is unbelievable. And while all this is going on, can't make this up either. What's the New York Times focused on? Headline: Heat is costing the U.S. economy billions in lost productivity. From meat packers to home health aides, workers are struggling in sweltering temperatures and productivity is taking a hit. Well, we just saw during a global pandemic killing God knows how many people globally. I don't believe the numbers. We had to get people back to work very quickly. To hell with it. The CDC came up with BS rules where you could basically go back to work after 5 days, even if you were still infected, coughing up your lungs, because we have to keep the economy going. And the New York Times, they're not going to focus on how many people are fainting, dying, getting extremely sick and dehydrated. We got to focus on we're losing productivity. Unbelievable. If you're new to Status Coup, I mean, we've been reporting on these matters for years. I want to show you, this was from our reporting 2 years ago outside the Amazon Staten Island warehouse that obviously became the historic first unionized Amazon in America after a worker-led union campaign for a year. We were covering it for a year, made several trips to that warehouse. Here's a clip in a rainstorm, so that's why you hear a little choppy audio. Here's a clip where the workers are describing the crippling heat that they're working in Amazon while the executives are sitting comfortably in wonderful, wonderful air conditioning. Take the audience inside. What are the conditions in here? How hot is it inside? And what are they doing about how hot it is inside?
Wiring is coming down from the ceiling and blocking the pods from getting to people. Things are melting. Things are not working. Like, seriously, the robotics are not working. We don't have Wi-Fi in there to call for help. The waters that they're trying to hand out, if they hand them out at all, are cloudy and they taste like plastic. We don't know how long they've been sitting there. Nobody drinks them. And the water coolers are completely out of water because everyone's going to the water coolers. It's a bad deal. But we're still being timed by the millisecond. People are coming out of their stations. They're complaining to their managers, and their managers are telling them it's all right, try to hold on a little bit longer, get back to work. No, you can't take additional breaks, which according to the OSHA laws, you are allowed additional breaks in extreme heat and extreme weather. This is Natalie, who's also an Amazon worker. We were talking when I reported this, and you said from the moment you're inside, you're dripping, soaking wet. Can you kind of talk about, all I see is fans, which would be blowing hot air back on workers, and they didn't actually give me any proof that workers are lying. So can you kind of talk about you and others? If you're soaking right when you get in there, that means it's basically a boiler room.
Right. I had actually had some fans placed into some of the sort stations where the section I work at probably about 6 months ago. And it was only after I filed a work comp case last year saying that the reason that some of the sorters were dropping packages on themselves, really heavy ones, is because especially in the afternoon it was so hot, especially during the summertime. So it was only because of the work comp case and my statement that they went ahead and gave fans, but the small fans they gave us are so filthy and dirty that you can actually smell and taste the dirt coming off the fan. So when I walked around the ship dock area, there were only a few large fans, but they were placed in front of computer tech workers and managers who stand at a desk all day and don't do much of anything. So those large fans are not being used for the actual workers who are really, really sweating to death in there.
And what's interesting to me, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, HR's offices, they're good. They got nice AC, people are wearing hoodies. So how does the temperature controlled system work fine there, but not where the actual workers are basically slaving away for 12 hours?
Exactly. When you walk into the HR office at the front of the warehouse, where all the administrative staff is, safety, loss control, HR people, some of the executives, it feels about 20 degrees cooler. You walk in and you feel the cold air hitting you, and every time I walk in, I say, wow, this is where they keep the air conditioning. Because the second you leave the HR office, it's hot, it's dirty, it's dusty, it's filthy, and especially if you have to work on the second, third, or fourth floors, heat rises. So it was most of the cases we had last week of people fainting and getting nosebleeds. Some of them did happen on the ship dock, but most of them were happening on the upper floors.
I would venture to guess the big businesses that are going around now lobbying against protections for workers as the U.S. is literally on fire, and the world, by the way. This is global boiling. I'm going to guess they, too, like the Amazon executives in Staten Island, are sitting very comfortably in their ivory towers with very, very, very strong and powerful air conditioning. This is what I mean by the economic Hunger Games. I really, really am concerned about what we're going to see. And I think if they actually collect and report the data accurately, we might be seeing a lot more heat-related deaths amidst global boiling and this climate inferno.